Hi, welcome to MTurk Guide. Today I want to talk about rejections. And I know I've harped a little bit about how rejections are obviously bad and you want to avoid them because you got to keep your approval rating up. But the fact of the matter is they do happen and it will happen sooner or later. I have over 55,000 hits completed and approved at this juncture, and I have 12 rejections. So I have 99.99, like 7, 8% approval. So I very rarely, if I can recall ever, being screened out of a hit because of my approval rating. But especially in your early days when you've got, less than 100, less than 500, less than 1,000, one or two rejections as a part of the bigger picture can hurt your percentage. And if you do get one in the early days, just start doing a lot of the 1 cent hits that are okay, that you can do well, that approve, and get those numbers built up and continue to provide yourself with that cushion so that if you do get another rejection or 2 or 3 down the road, it doesn't hurt quite as much. So that needs to be your strategy. Hopefully, I know a lot of folks that I've spoken to on comments are reading and listening all this before they start their journey, which is great. So if you are early on in your journey, don't take too many risks. There's a time and a place for risks with MTurk, and the beginning is definitely not it. So, but it is important for you to know that, it happens and how to deal with it when it does happen. So rejections can happen for a lot of different reasons. I've captured a few. Some are your fault as the worker, and some is the requester's fault. But it can happen if you don't follow the directions. It's another point I harp on a lot, right? Read those instructions. The first time you do it, the 10th time you do it in a batch, not in the same day, but if you haven't done that batch in a week, skim the directions after you've read them the first time. Make sure they haven't changed. Don't assume, right, that everything is the same if you haven't done that batch in a while. I don't suggest that you read the directions every single time you do it, but use some discretion and make sure you're periodically reviewing the directions. For surveys and things of that nature, always read the directions, because sometimes there'll be you need to put in the code plus your worker ID or something like that. You want to make sure that you're doing everything up to par. So not following directions, it does happen. It happens to the best of us. It's happened to me. And once you get a rejection, that's totally your fault for not following directions. You quickly adjust yourself and start, reading those directions. So it happens, but try not to let it happen to you. Within surveys, you can fail attention checks. So an attention check is something that is meant to be in excruciatingly obvious as to what the answer would be. An example might be there's, agree, disagree, whatever, gradient, and the question is, I commute to the moon every day for work. That would be a strongly disagree. Even if you're an astronaut, you don't commute every day to the moon for work. So for the astronauts out there who are doing MTurk, obviously you need to be wary of those. And why are those in there? They're in there because there are people that allow bots to randomly click in surveys and then submit it for compensation. And what happens is that really affects the data of the researcher, and it makes their overall results to an extent invalid. So it's really important when you're doing surveys that you read every question, you answer every question to the best of your ability, no random clicking. And intention checks are designed to screen out the people who are doing that random clicking either via a bot or just not paying attention. I will make one other note on surveys and attention checks. Really, surveys in general is there have been requesters that will reject on the basis of doing a survey too quickly or a hit in general too quickly. So for that, you always want to make sure you've accepted the hit before you start working on it. That's just best practice so you don't lose it. but you always want to make sure that you've accepted it. And when you're doing a survey, it'll usually give you an estimate either on the title and the description or in the informed consent, which is the first page with all the information about what the university is, the researcher, etc. It'll say 10 minutes. A lot of times they overestimate. So, if you're done in 2 minutes, I think I would just, you know, give it another couple minutes and wait till you submit it. Now, granted, the researchers can go in if they're using like Qualitrix or whatever, and they can see how long you spent on every page. Most researchers aren't doing that for every single hit, but if they get one that seems an anomaly in terms of the time, they may go digging into each page. Don't give them that string to pull. Just make sure that you think to yourself, would a reasonable person have been able to read and answer these questions in the time that I did it in? And if you did it really fast for some reason, if you're a very fast reader, try to tone that back. I'm a fast reader, so I've tried to tone that back a little bit and just, try to, don't dilly-dally, but I also don't fly through. I've yet to have a rejection for that reason, but I have heard of it. So be aware, it can happen. And again, they're trying to identify bots, or people that aren't paying attention to the survey. So the intent is right, but sometimes they catch up well-meaning people in that net. So on the same idea, incorrect completion codes with surveys. Sometimes you go to copy and paste a completion code and it doesn't copy in it, and you paste and you don't realize you maybe pasted the completion code from the last survey you did. But the completion code is how the requester is linking the data without using any identifying information about you. So it is important that you make sure that your completion code matches. One of my rejections is actually from a requester that's notorious for having a uncopy and pastable code in their survey software. And so many people, myself included, got caught up in that, or we received a rejection because of the wrong code. And I wasn't astute enough, and it was early in my Turking career that I didn't realize it, and I just went along my way. So now I'm just a little, I look at the first letter and the last letter as I'm copying and pasting it. And when I put it in, I make sure that at least that matches. You could go as far to look at each letter. Sometimes they're long strings. So I would say, just spot check, but double check. You don't want a rejection for something like that when you really did take the time to go through the survey. Sometimes new requesters come in and they misunderstand that their view of MTurk is very different from yours. They can see some limited pieces of data on you, and it's not it's hard for new requesters. So sometimes they don't understand what they're doing, and sometimes another thing happens where requesters who have been on for a while try to use automation to accept and reject hits, and automation doesn't always work, right? Because the point of us doing this is that this is work that needs to be done by humans. So in general, new requesters, old requesters can fall victim to misunderstandings or automation misunderstandings. So another thing, the requester could just plain be a meanie head. I say that in the lovingest way possible for the requesters out there that may be listening to this. They're independent people, and they can do what they want, and they can be unreasonable, and they can reject and refuse to turn it over. So if you run into somebody like that, don't spend a lot of time on them, but go to Turk Opticon, write a review, let everybody else know your experience, and then let others decide if they want to work for that requester. Because frankly, karma will catch up with a requester like that. Their TO will go red, and nobody will want to work with them, and their hits will sit there. So it will happen. The requester could be running a scam. There are some requesters that will take data and just reject, even if you did everything perfectly, because they don't want to pay. In that case, if it's a university or college, you can contact the IRB. You always need to contact the requester first, but if they're not responsive, you can contact their IRB. There are some obvious scam hits out there that aren't surveys. They're sometimes called like hidden affiliate. links, or there's some that aren't as obvious. I'm going to do, I'm thinking about how to do this in the best way possible, because it's, you're calling people out, but there are a few requesters that you need to stay away from. But for the purposes of this webcast, I'm just going to say, make sure you're looking at TO data, Turk Opticon data, and if it's red, stay away. Because that's usually people have been burned, and they will tell other people that via Turk Opticon. So, and the last one, survey completed multiple times. Some requesters don't have a mechanism to screen you out of a survey if you've done it before, and your database only goes for 45 days. So if you did it 60 or 90 or 120 days ago, unless you happen to remember it, you're not going to know that. So, you got to try to have a memory for things. And if you're not sure, I would just contact the requester and say, I'm not sure if I did this before. Can you double check? Again, that's the exception rather than the rule, but it does happen. So be aware of it. If you see that a requester says something like, if you've done this hit before, don't do it again, the red flag should go up. Well, do they have an automated system to prevent me from doing it again? I think some of the requesters don't understand the number of surveys that some of us do, and they think we do a handful of them in a couple month period and we should remember, but frankly, that's not how it goes. We do a lot and we don't remember, nor should we have to. But as I said, keeping your rejections to a minimum is important. Keep your approval rating as close as you can to 100%. So what to do when you're rejected? So when you're in your dashboard, you're going to see your hit status, and there's a rejected column. And every day I just refresh a couple of times a day, and I look and I make sure there's no new rejects that pop up. It also shows up in your summary down below. So those are two places you can look for them. But in this case, I happen to have one on September 10th. So you would find the date of the rejection, and then you're going to click on that date. And then you're going to locate the reject within that date. And what happens is that they're going to give you a reason. In this particular case, this was totally my fault. I didn't understand the hit very well. And the first one I did was a bit confusing. And then subsequent ones I did fine on. But this one, I screwed it up because I didn't quite understand it. And I should have probably either returned it or just asked the requester to clarify. Because in retrospect, he was very responsive. But it was my fault. It was justified. So read the reject reason and, decide if it's justified, if you understand it, you want more info. If you want to contact the requester for any reason, you just click on the name of the requester. In this case, it was PS Analytics. You're going to get the page comes to a box that will allow you to contact the requester directly. The subject is auto-filled in with the hit ID so that they'll know which hit you're talking about. And then in the comments, you have 1,024 characters. To be nice, give details, give your recollection. And I say mention Turk Opticon to just make sure that requesters are aware that it exists and it's something you can leverage to report on your experience overall, negative, positive. So that tool is there for you to contact the requester. So again, in contact the requester, give your recollection of the hit and how you performed it and any clarifying details. For me, a good way to approach requesters is to seek to understand how you can improve for the future. So, say, I think this is what I did wrong. Can you validate that that's the case? Just have that dialogue with them, and make sure if you have any area, room for improvement in terms of maybe the directions were not clear or you interpreted them different than others. Put that out there. Let them know that they can improve their hit, and you can improve your work for the future by having that conversation. If you feel that it was unjustified or it was a gray area, ask them to overturn the rejection. They do have the ability to do that. If you feel it was unfair or it felt like a scam, do let the requester know very respectfully that you intend to write a review on Turk Opticon detailing your experience. It's fair. It allows them to understand that there is a mechanism out there for workers to congregate virtually, if you will, and talk about our experiences. And if they understand the implications of having a lot of bad reviews, then they'll probably want to work with you one way or another. Keep it professional, but at the end of the day, don't spend too long or dwell on a rejection. It happens, and your time is better spent at a certain point. Your time is better spent just moving on. But certainly consider taking these type of actions to talk with a requester and understand where you stand. I will say that requesters can block workers, and too many blocks will raise a red flag with Amazon. So the reason why I say keep it professional and respectful, besides the obvious, is that you don't want a requester to block you based on a conversation. Some requesters do use blocks inappropriately. It's something I'll go into in a later webcast in more detail. They use it to prevent retakes, which isn't correct. They should be using qualifications to do that. But you really don't want to get a block on your account just because you mouthed off to a requester or something like that, or let your temper get the better of you. So just keep it professional as you would in any job on or offline. So I think that's pretty much the summary of rejections. I'm not going to talk too much on the topic any further because I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but there are some nuances that I think we covered here today. Let me know if you have any questions. The dialogue with folks has been really great. I've really enjoyed commenting and going back and forth with people in the messages. Definitely continue to tell me what it is you need me to talk about, and I will pump out these webcasts as quickly as I can. So again, as usual, I appreciate it. Please comment, like, subscribe, and talk to me. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.